distribution side-wise that you are wondering about? Is there any question?
Yes, please, because I found this beautiful list with the Sanskrit names, and now I lost it. I don't know where to find it anymore.
Oh, do you mean the PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, is it in resources or where is it? Or general? Or where do you usually put them?
Hello. Okay.
Yeah.
Apparently, my Wi-Fi stops when I get a call. Interesting. It should be in review. So if you go to the team and then into review class, yeah, it's just like for me, it just shows up above our meeting that we're in right now. I just added the video to it yesterday. Maybe that's why you didn't see it anymore. Like because it changed a little bit.
Right. Oh, okay. Thanks.
But it should be there. Yeah. And we're a lot of slides, a lot of slides that the 51 mental states produced. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Rachel.
For the Westerhoff lecture, that's just one single lecture that's about an hour and 20 minutes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's the Abhidharma lecture. If you, I mean, it's a whole lecture series, but that then goes into the philosophical school. So if you're interested in Madhyamaka and Yogacara, it's really nice. But
okay.
Yeah.
And for the attendance quiz for that would be Monday and Tuesday's attendance quiz. Do we fill out anything or no?
I didn't make one.
Okay.
So yeah, you'll get attendance for
okay.
one day for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'll see that you did it based on the quiz next week. Yeah. Did you find that lecture also helpful? Did it give you some additional information?
Yeah, it's really interesting. But I sort of mucked up on the response to the question because in Gert's presentation, I think it was a bit different. The names were a bit different. So I'm sorry because I was going with the Westerhoff presentation. So the first one was the seven texts that were present in the Theravadan tradition, and the second one, I think Gerd said it was in the. Sorry, where was it? Mahasamgika. And I think that's what Westerhoff said, and I think Gerd, he called it differently.
Gerd was not talking about the Mahasamgika, I think. Because
the Mahasamgika, they have the text complete, but in the Chinese translation, is it?
So that's actually something I want to follow up on with I have to look up because the presentation that Gerd gave was the Sarvastivada and Theravada, and we have this and that's also what Gethin was presenting, right? In the first reading, Gethin was speaking about these two as full sources in the canons, so full texts, canonological texts, and of those, Gethin and Gerd said that the Sarvastivadana is available in Chinese. and only partially in other languages. But yeah, so I want to figure out what, like whether it's really a full translation of the of that. Something we have to keep in mind is the strata. These 18 schools are not entirely straightforward either. They're not enumerated as the same 18 schools. And for example, the Theravada, which is the Sthaviravada, early on, and then they just like Theravada is the modern name for them. Like there are things to know when we talk about the 18 schools. It's a little bit more complicated than there are 18. The Mahasamgikas they're a little bit different. And yeah, neither Gerd nor Gethin spoke about a Mahasamgika Abhidhamma, if I could remembered correctly. Yeah. So he went a little bit further. He also spoke about the Pudgalavadins, right? Someone was asking Gerd about the Pudgalavadins on Friday, and I think that should have clarified that question a little bit. But it's an Abhidhamma tradition, and the Mahasamgika, they have an Abhidhamma tradition, definitely. It's just a question whether they have a full, like a full Abhidhamma available now as like a chronological text, like the 7 texts for the Vaibhashikas, for the Sarvastivadins. The electricity is doing weird things today. So, yes. Do you have a question about that? So the 7 treatises, they're each of them has 7 treatises, but they are named differently. It's a different list of 7 for the different ones. And you can look it up back in Gethin. He has the exact names for them. Any other questions? Yes, Dina.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about slide 39. What does it mean that 4 beliefs are affirmative and 1 belief is negative?
What does it mean? What could it mean? Anyone. So in the notes it says that of the 5 views, 4 are affirmative and 1 can also be negative. How can we understand that? I'm gonna open that slide. If anyone can think of Miriam? Miri? You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now yes.
Now? Okay. Teams is very slow today, so the unmuting takes like a minute. So just to guess the extreme views, that could be both, because annihilation is like the nihilistic extreme is like a negative view. Rather than believing in something, you believe in the absence of something.
Yeah. Like that there's no person at all, there's no nothing, like nothing at all. Like the view of the extreme view of annihilation can be negative or is negative. I'm trying to find out where I said, on which slide I said that those two.
It's 39 in the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, that's from the Samuchaya, right? So just to just to read to everyone what it said, what the question was about. So of these 5 ideas, how many are affirmative and how many are negative? 4 affirmative ideas because of the fact that they attribute a particular nature to the knowable, and also because of the fact that they attribute the highest purity to views. One of these ideas is usually negative. So that refers then to the view of annihilation or the extreme views. Yes, Lucia?
Yeah, I was wondering if it could also be the perverted belief, like regarding something as being non-existent. So maybe that could be also by itself the negative one, like not believing that karma cause and effect exist.
Yes. So if we go, sorry, I think I should share the slides. So if you look at just look at the views again. No, that doesn't show me what I want to see. Not this one. 1 second. Does weird things. I'm sorry. So if we look at the 5 views, if we just quickly review the 5 views or beliefs, where did I go? Yeah. So the belief in the transitory collection as an I was the first one, right? So that's definitely affirmative. The extreme views are with regard to the self and the 5 aggregates to be permanent or discontinuous. So that they come to a rough end. Perverted views is really, really a negation, so that these are not existent. That that cause and effect do not causes do not lead to effects. That the law of causal relationships does not work. So that's then the Charvakan view, and then the holding beliefs as paramount and holding discipline as paramount, those are clearly related to the first ones, right? So they're affirmative, where a self is concerned. Actually, if one says, if one negates a self, that's still an affirmative idea. Because so negating the existence. You can only refute the self itself if there is something, right? Then you refute the self. So that relates to a question that we had some other day. Madhyamaka does not refute the self. It refutes the views of the self. If it were to refute the self, that would mean there is a self and then it smashes the self. But since there is never a self, it's like we have to be a little bit careful of how we think about this. When we think about something to be refuted, to be annihilated, then there needs to be something first. But the view, Madhyamaka does not make a statement with regard to that. It just refutes all the views of the self. Now everyone's video's turned off, but Lucia's. So yeah, I think what the Abhidhamma Samuccaya really refers to is, as Lucia said, it's negating the existence of the karmic law, the perverted views, because the definition itself is that it regards an existing fact as being non-existent. Yeah. Okay. Do you have any other thoughts or questions?
I have one question.
Yes.
So I don't remember which day it was last week, but somebody asked, like, how do you know for sure that your belief is a supreme belief, right? And I think the answer was something like, I don't remember exactly what it was, but like through study and experience or something like that. But I guess my question is, couldn't anybody else say the same thing about their belief? Other religions, like, we know it's the right belief, it's supreme because we've experienced it, because we've studied it. So I'm just wondering if there might be a better explanation.
I open that up for discussion. Please, what are your thoughts on this question? With the
Or maybe I can even like go a little bit further with the question.
Yeah.
So if you haven't experienced the beliefs of other religions or other people, like, you haven't studied them yourself, you've only studied your own view. So even with that, how do you know?
I mean, I have from my notes, I can kind of that we develop correct belief through studying the texts and traditions. So first we learn on a course level. For example, like if I insult someone, they'll get angry, and so on. So first seeing actions and results on a course level, and then on a more subtle level. So I think the answer is like, because you're studying the right texts, I would think. That makes sense.
Right. So then how do you know that you're studying the right texts? Like...
because our teachers told us so, I think, is the answer. Answer to that.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is like,
right.
Is there really a way?
Does anyone?
I guess it's when the study really leads to a recognition, to an understanding. It's like when the study of the text meets with your own mind. When it becomes obvious that this is that this is the truth.
So Yeah, that makes sense. But then, I myself have a Christian background, and a lot of things I've studied in Christianity, I would say the exact same thing. Because I've studied these texts, I believe that these are true. I think the same could be said.
I think through experience, like seeing that if I do good actions, good things happen, and then through logic would be the two ways I would look at it. That you can follow the logic and reasoning. That's my view anyway.
Yeah, but there is only this experience and that how did you say, logic that's inherent to you. I mean, there's nothing outside. There's nothing, that would. I mean, it's you and your study of these texts that makes you come to a conclusion. It pertains to your own consciousness, mind, whatever you want to call it. No?
So on a course level, yeah, but on like as far as like the 8 consciousnesses, like in the 4 like primary elements and stuff like that, I can't experience that directly, but I can use my inference, logic and reasoning, and is this reasoning sound? Is the logic sound?
I mean, no one would probably, like, once there is direct realization of selflessness, or once someone has become a Buddha, there's probably no question about that experience, right? So let's put that aside. But I think Joe's question is really about right now, like, how can we say that our like, whoever it is, right? Every tradition thinks of their own view usually as being the correct one. But how can we actually know, like, what is here defined as the right view and the correct one, the paramount, the supreme one, and what is, how can we judge whether we're really on the right track, or whether we're just thinking that what we believe is the supreme one, and it's actually not. And that holds like, whether we're Christian, whether we're Hindu, whether we're Buddhist, whether we're Muslim, each tradition thinks that their own view is the correct one, as the supreme one, right? So how can we judge what the correct one is? Rachel.
I don't know if this is directly applicable or not, but I also have asked or spoken with Dion about this for kind of a similar reason. I don't identify as a Christian, but I do have a Christian background. And growing up in a Christian household, there's a lot of dogma about only Christianity is right, and if you're not Christian, you're going to go to hell. And then studying Buddhism, if you've come across passages in the text that say, only Buddhism is right, and you're never going to become liberated if you're not a Buddhist, it can have a similar flavor of dissatisfaction for me anyway. And so that was why I brought it up to her. And she told me that the reason that you can tell whether it's a correct view or an incorrect view is that it's operative and not it's an operative philosophy. So the study of the material should result in a transformation of your experience. So if your experience is transforming because of your study of the material, then you know that it's correct. Or if your practices lead to a transformation of your experience, you know that it's correct. And if you're not feeling that kind of operative shift, then you can judge for yourself that it's not leading you the correct way. And that, I think that applies to all religious traditions and all religious scholarship.
Yes, Joe?
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting explanation, Rachel. Yeah, I remember her saying that too. So don't you think, I'm curious what everybody thinks about this. At this point, don't you think that ultimately it boils down to trust, or dare I say faith?
Anyone?
I think there has to be some sort of trust at some level, like just to start, like to make the next step. So I think there has to be some degree of trust just to begin. Like, reading a text or meeting someone, and you have to have enough trust at least to listen a little more.
You at least need some inspiration, right? So when we talk about trust, we can also get technical here with the 3 or 4 types of faith, being the inspired faith, just through the presence of a teacher or through being around the stupa, thinking like, oh, there's something. Then the longing faith, where one develops the wish to develop similar qualities and so on. And then the trusting faith, which is either a precursor or synonymous to irreversible faith. And that comes through thorough understanding. So that's the one we strive for. And in some explanation, that only comes to its culmination on the bhumis. So with realization, one develops completely irreversible faith. But even if we take it prior to direct realization, it's a thorough understanding, of correct understanding of the subject matter of the Dharma, of the presentations, that leads to proper faith. The first 2 are not enough. They're just precursors that we need to work in the right directions. And then the other thing that I wanted to say is also probably consider whether we're talking about the view of a Buddhist or the actual view of non-self here. When we talk about the view, it's not that everyone who's a Buddhist holds the right view and can hold on to that as the supreme. If one has a mistaken view, which we all have until we really realize selflessness, and we think that what we think of the right thing right now, we grasp to that as the supreme. We're like, everyone is still equally going down a rabbit hole, right? Still it's still not it's still holding if our view is still based on grasping to a self in some way, then that still belongs to grasping to the 5 aggregates as the self, if that makes sense. So Rachel?
I just have a question for Joe. I'd like to know a little bit more about what prompted you to bring up faith in this context. And if you don't mind sharing, I was curious if your denomination was either Pentecostal or evangelical.
So the only reason I said the word faith is because, like, to me, faith, I think it's synonymous with just trust. And so the only reason I was saying that is because I think ultimately at some level, whatever you're studying, you have to believe that that's the right thing. So, like, that's why I was bringing that up. Like, not really anything to do with faith as we kind of see it today, but really just whatever you're studying, if you think it's right, it means you have to trust that it's right. Because really, how else are you going to know? Even if you're feeling some type of transformation or whatever, I don't think it matters the religion. Like, there's a reason that there are world religions, because people feel different having studied them and following their teachings. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I mean, that answers it. But I also think it's like the conceptions of faith and trust might be slightly different coming from an evangelical background or a Pentecostal background. And then in Buddhism, I think there's a slightly different presentation. I don't know if that really answers your question, but yeah, I just thought
Are you
I
talking
would
about like
comment
the
about that.
difference? Okay. Are you talking about like the difference between blind faith, those types of things? What do you think the differences are?
Well, in both evangelicalism and Pentecostalism, the idea of salvation or their soteriology is stems from the idea that through grace alone, solely through faith, can you be saved. So they have, I think that in Buddhism you have a core tenet of selflessness or no self, whereas in evangelicalism or Pentecostalism, their like core tenet or their normative event would be faith. So I think there's a slightly different focus in the way that the religions emphasize faith, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
My electricity just went out, so it may have gone out for ink also. Can
No,
anyone
I'm
hear?
here. I'm here. I'm actually full. I'm using my phone and not my
Okay.
Wi-Fi.
Okay. It got quiet now, so I couldn't tell. So.
Yeah. So leaving the question of faith aside, like, do you think we can right now 100% say what is right? Or is it more of a continuum where we're striving towards more certainty and towards more conviction?
I think it has to be the continuum. Someone else has their hand up. I'll let them.
Yeah, Dina?
No, I just wanted to say that I think we cannot have the really right view, the view of ultimate nature in Buddhism, but usually what we can see is more like a result of wrong view, our suffering, and if we trust that we suffer or we have problems, then we look at the Buddhist explanation, and Buddhist explanation is like today it was said that ignorance and wrong view about self is the root of all the problems. Like all the problems start from this, or all conditioned existence start from this ignorance and wrong view. So, like Buddhism, they offer like the way to check for yourself, but the right view is on the first place. Like first the right view, and then you can meditate. There's problem.
I don't hear you really well. Can everyone else hear Dina, or am I the only one who has trouble understanding her?
Sorry. Is it better?
Probably.
Maybe it's my phone. I also use phone. Sorry. I will write it later. It's not good.
Okay, while we were waiting for Dina, I think one thing that was interesting was what Bill said about reasoning. How do you think that relates to the right view, or like coming to the right view, and how does this apply for us right now? And is it enough to only study one tradition, or do we find the right view through reasoning in relation to other traditions? Oh, Dina is back, I think. Do you want to say again what you said? Maybe.
If it's clear, can you hear or not?
Try. I can say after a few sentences.
Yeah, I think we cannot have like really right view right now, or even understand what it is if we are ordinary people. But we can see that we have problem like suffering, and we can trust this maybe. I mean, trust, not just believe, but really can see this. And then Buddhism, they offer kind of way. First, you need to form the right view, and then you can meditate, and then you can engage in different activities. So maybe Buddhism, it shows the end, the result, or it shows this suffering because of wrong views, and then because of this trust, we can trust in that our view is not right. Like it shows some kind of link of like 12 links of interdependence, and if we think this makes sense, then we can trust that our view right now is not really right. Something like this.
Yes. Soren has his hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I don't think I can really like formulate an answer to anything, but I think this relates a little bit to questions that I also sort of struggle with a little bit when we have presentations like these that sort of outline in detail what is an antidote to incorrect views, that kind of thing, and then how that very detailed outline or sort of map in some sense relates to some other statement that we also commonly hear, where the Madhyamaka say that there is really no view that can be established like that, or the view is that there is no view, or it's beyond extremes, or that kind of a. So I'm wondering how to think accurately about sort of those two and how they relate together. And maybe I'm sort of coming to some of like maybe the understanding that what we are studying now in this Abhidharma context is more like a map or a path rather than sort of an actual established view. And then the view itself is sort of beyond description or beyond, or if that is a meaningful way to think about it. And then, yeah, there's something interesting about sort of the scope of rationality in these Buddhist traditions that we come across, that like rationality can only take us so far is really the way I hear it described often. And then how does that relate to our talk now, that we have to establish the accurate view, and this is the antidote to this mistaken view. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's sort of some place where my thoughts have been going these days.
Yeah, I think we actually have to be a little bit careful. Like, at no point did we say we're trying to establish the right view. We're talking about root afflictive emotions, and the views belong to the root afflictive emotions, and there's something that need to get rid of. We haven't actually spoken about what the right view is. The view of selflessness is a very, very vague, vague and in the different traditions differently interpreted statement. So what we said here is what's not the view. The view is not like the we cannot grasp to the self based on the aggregates. That's what we said. We said it's not annihilation or permanence. It's not like wrong view, not that there's no karma, cause and effect. So these we refuted, and holding on to any of those as the paramount or any view that features them in some way. That would be misleading and would not be the efficient one, right? And that's a wrong belief, is like grasping to them as the paramount. So all we did so far was really talking about what it's not. And what will really impel samsara. If you hold on to the view of the self, that's a problem. And that creates all the other afflictions. And of course, we already spoke a little bit about the antidotes of like getting rid of ignorance or getting rid of the view of the self. And when we do that, then we will, then the other afflictions will also not arise. But really, what the view is, the Abhidhamma, like what we have done so far, is really mapping things. We're not, we haven't gone into a debate of what the non-self actually, like the absence of a self actually is, or what the view is. First of all, we're speaking about a mix of different Abhidhamma traditions here. Today we spoke about the Alaya Vijnana, which means that's something that comes from the Yogacara tradition, who have a very different take on reality than the Vaibhashika or the Sarvastivada Abhidhamma presents. If we even just look at the most superficial idea of the two types of selves and that kind of stuff, right? So we're not really looking at the view. And then when we talk about right view, we also, or not having a view, the Prasangika Madhyamaka are considered in the Tibetan tradition as the highest philosophical school because they're irrefutable, because they do not have their own position. And so from a Prasangika point of view, or from a point of discussion, then everything, like even the Svatantrika Madhyamaka, or making it less complicated because that's a whole other topic, even the Yogacharans hold on to some sort of self, or they establish something, even everything being the mind, and that lets them fall into the extreme of eternalism, or it makes them affirmative of something. So of some sort of self phenomena. And in that sense, from the Madhyamaka perspective, holding on to any of the other Buddhist views as being the supreme, as being the ultimate and the most exalted, the paramount, would also be holding a belief to be paramount, would also be negative, right? Like, just if we think about it completely, and but if you look from another perspective, if you look from the Yogacharan perspective of how they interpret the three natures and all of that, and their way of phrasing it, they would argue differently. Their point of view is differently. But there's a lot. There's no. So ultimately, I think it comes down to the realization that it brings forth. For us, though, it's much more difficult to, like, as ordinary sentient beings, that we don't have that direct insight. And therefore, we need to rely on what Bill said, which was reasoning. And that doesn't work in itself. So Joe mentioned that we engage in some studies. We start studying a certain religion or a certain view, a certain philosophy, all of that because we have some interest, we have some initial faith. or believe in that to be correct. But if we only study one thing, then this looks like a coherent belief system in itself. It's only when we're challenged by other traditions that we can see whether which one prevails in the discussion, right? If Vaibhashika debates with a Madhyamikan, and then we know whether the Madhyamika or Madhyamika thought actually is more effective or more logical than the Vaibhashikan. If you have listened to Westerhoff, the Putgalavadins make sense in themselves if they're not challenged. The Vaibhashikans, with the 3 times being with the 3 times being established, being existent, it makes sense in their in the way that they put it all together in their belief system. But only by being challenged, then can we see whether it comes to a logical whether we come to a logical conclusion about its correctness, I guess. And I think that's also what happens with general Buddhist ideas and then non-Buddhist ideas, right? The whole system evolved in communication with the other traditions. It's like this huge field of debate in India where the different traditions, different spiritual traditions were debating with each other, that brings forth that hierarchy in some sense and that kind of stuff. But there's just this logical engagement. And I think if we're just entirely stuck in one, then it's problematic to say that, like, of course, we feel that it's supreme, that this is the only logical one, because we're not studying anything else and we don't get the logical challenge, if that makes sense. Someone else wants to? There's probably too much. Did that address what you said a little bit, Soren?
I think so. Yeah, like that. There's like that interplay between different formulation of what the, let's say, what the proper view is or is not. That it makes sense that conversation is going on. I still have the question though, if, let's say, from the Prasangika position that I think most people we come in contact with would sort of hold, even if they teach another view, would it make sense to map all of this also onto the provisional and the non-provisional ultimate, so that in this context of studying the Abhidharma, then like it's more about mapping out a functional map than it is about establishing what is ultimate from that kind of a I'm not sure if that makes sense as a question, but that's stuck with me as a question here.
Yeah. Does anyone want to chime in on that?
The way he just put it makes sense to me, that the Abhidharma is giving us like the definitions and the clarifications for everything that was taught, but it's not really, at least what I've studied, what I've seen so far, it's not really seeing what the ultimate view is that I'm aware what we've seen.
Yeah, we will talk about the view a little bit in the chapter on the correct and incorrect, where we go through the different philosophical schools. But yeah, especially those of you who were in the Madhyanta Vibhaga class last year and we studied the 3 natures, like you wouldn't see that whole presentation as the thoroughly established nature, or if you think about the two truths, it's not the ultimate. It describes how things appear, right? And how things are in the relative, how that works. We have to be a little bit careful because the different philosophical schools use these categories slightly different. So I always have to wave a flag of carefulness. But yeah, overall, it is a compilation. What we're looking at right now is a drawing together all the information about what we experience and what we can experience throughout the stages of practice. And so hi. Welcome back. Yay! I don't know where I stopped.
Stages of practice.
Yeah, so it is like a roadmap. It's like a roadmap of our current experience as beings. And then also it will talk about the different stages. But it is a more relative oriented presentation rather than this the debate of the ultimate view. Bill?
Yeah, I just realized I disagree with what I said 5 minutes ago. That in its way, it's a different. I think in its way, like the Abhidharma Kosha is presenting an ultimate view. It's just not the same way as Yogacara or Prasangika. Anyway, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure what I said before was not accurate.
It wasn't completely wrong. It was just not particular. We just need to be so careful whenever we make statements like that. So when we look at the three natures, what we're looking at right now would belong to the dependent nature, right? So it's not a thoroughly established nature. It's not addressed. If we look at the two truths, so far we haven't addressed the ultimate, but we're addressing the experience and the constituents of our experience in samsara. A samsaric being has these 5 aggregates and relates to objects, right? So that we can say, probably. Is anyone here?
Yeah, I have so like would you say that like what we're studying like with the 5 aggregates for the Vaibhashika, yeah, this was it. Like for them this was their ultimate. But it's just because we have, access to other views that we don't see this as the ultimate. Does that make sense or?
Well, you would have to study the Vaibhashika view to really say that this would not be the ultimate, that this would be the ultimate for them. I don't think that you can like you can phrase it so easily for the Vaibhashikan, what they mean. We're getting a metaphor. Looking forward to it. So maybe we can go so far as to say that the view of the Vaibhashikans is that of the non-existence of the self of person, and that ultimately the smallest indivisible particles exist in the smallest moments of mind, right? So not the entire present, like that's an underlying philosophical view that leads to this presentation that we have seen. The Vaibhashikans, they do define relative and ultimate differently than we do, than we find it in the other schools. So for the Vaibhashikan and the Sautrantikan, I think the relative is that which appears as gross stuff and that can be broken down, and then the ultimate is what cannot be broken down into further constituents, either physically by smashing it into pieces or mentally dissecting it. So still the presentation of the aggregates, how they appear, fit that into the definition of the relative and the ultimate for the Vaibhashikans. So that's why I'm saying we have to be very careful, because the definition also of relative and ultimate is different for the different philosophical schools. I'm still waiting for our metaphor. I got distracted. I'm looking forward to it. You can also just say it. Okay. I think maybe
Is anyone there? So.
Yeah, I think Inka just doesn't really want to talk to us today. Oh, she's coming back.
There she is.
we have quite a little bit of rain. Apparently, Wi-Fi's and electricity don't like that. Yeah, sorry for that. And now we're out of time and you have other classes to go to. I really like the quote that I started reading, or the thoughts that is written here in the discussion. So please have a look at it. And feel free to keep discussing. I think you had some really interesting thoughts and topics today. And I made a discussion channel where, like, questions that you ask me that just need an answer for class, I'll keep posting those. But feel free to discuss things like this with each other, because we don't have common space. We don't run into each other on the hallway right now. We don't eat lunch together, so we don't discuss with each other enough. And I think if you make a little bit of an extra effort, we can get at least some of that discussion rolling. If you post your thoughts or your questions and open them up for discussion with the entire group in the discussion channel. And I'm not gonna give particular answers there. Like that's really your space where you can discuss with each other. And if I see something interesting, I will pick up on it for the review classes. But yeah, feel free to discuss like we did today and think about each other's questions. It would be very fruitful, I think. Also, if you didn't hear something clearly, you can ask each other. You can see whether your understanding confirms with that of others of what happened in class and so on. Yes, Rachel?
I just have one really quick question, and I couldn't find this in the review material. Maybe it was in there and I just didn't see it, but there's 5 ways that the mental states are concurrent with the main mind, but I actually only got 4. Could you tell us what the five ways are really quick before class ends?
They have the same object, they have the same faculty, they happen at the same time, they relate to the same aspects and the same substances. Okay, they are in the review material somewhere. I know that I posted them. I wrote them down twice.
Is she stuck again?
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.